On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Luis Eduardo Luna. Luis is I usually say fascinating, but I'm going to say extraordinary man. He's had a fascinating life. I've known about Luis for a number of years. He was originally born in Colombia. As we spoke about his background, he ended up going to a religious school, eventually moving to Spain, traveling to France, and eventually coming back to Colombia, where he had a chance encounter with Terrance McKenna and experienced his first yagé encounter through that. As he said, that really opened him up and led him to do a tremendous amount of research and field work. He ended up teaching in Scandinavia, in Sweden and Finland. Did a tremendous amount of field work in the Peruvian Amazon, where he really started exploring this idea of plants as teachers. He made a really wonderful little documentary called Don Emilio y sus doctorcitos, Don Emilio and his little doctors, which you can see on YouTube. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. And really one of the pioneers in this field of really exploring the plant intelligence, plants as a tool for connection of spirit. He's had the chance, the opportunity to work with, speak with, learn from, I think, some of the luminaries in this field, people like Richard Evans Schultes and Wasson, Hoffman, Dolmatoff, just these really pioneers in this field. So I think he's a really amazing human being. He's very much contributed to the knowledge of this field. I think, like anything, we owe a great debt to those who have come before us. So it was very much a pleasure and really an honor that he came on this podcast. Also, thank you to my friend and our mutual friend, Luis Solarat, for bridging this connection. So I trust you all will very much enjoy this conversation. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good way. It's a website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers also give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, thank you very much to the people supporting that way. And if you're able to do that, thank you in advance. And as always, if you're able to help with the algorithms, that really helps to get this show out to a bigger audience. So if you're viewing this on YouTube, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, leaving any questions or comments in the comment section. And if you're listening to this on the big platforms, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. And then finally, if you're interested in working with myself and my colleague Marav Artsy, experiencing plants as medicine, as connection mediums, we have our 2026 schedule out, and you can find more information about that on my website at nicotianarustica.org. So I think that's it for the intro, and without further ado, here is my conversation with Luis.
Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
Okay, great. So I interrupted you. We were just catching up a little bit before we started, and you were saying you were just waking up because yesterday was a festival of Iemanjá, one of the Orishas in Brazil, where you're coming from. So yes. I interrupted you, but please continue because I think this is really fascinating.
Well, February the 2nd is the day of Iemanjá, which is one of the Orishas. Is the Orisha is the queen of the sea. And you see many images here in Brazil, about Iemanjá, which is a lot of the images is a white lady. At some point, became white, but of course it's black. It's African, originally. And I learned about Iemanjá the first time when I was doing field work on the Barquinha. Barquinha is one of the three religious organizations that use ayahuasca as a sacrament. It's the second one. The first one was created by Irineu Serra in Acre, and then the second one it was Daniel Pereira de Matos, who was not really a disciple, but he was took ayahuasca a few times with Irineu Serra. And then he had a vision. He saw an angel with a blue book and revealed to him a new kind of religion, and he was so. And this new religion is very much influenced by the Afro-Brazilian religions, Candomblé and Umbanda, and so in the Barquinha, the main altar, you see the images of Jesus and San Anthony and so on. But then you see below you have the mermaids, and one Iemanjá is also associated with the mermaids and the black slave. So it is a very very syncretic religion. And I love that, because you have at one side in the ceremonies from 8 to 12, you take ayahuasca, you go to the church, they are singing, there are prayers, Catholic prayers, images of Virgin Mary and the saints and so on. But after midnight, then, it's the time of the terreiro. You go to the terreiro that comes from terra, tierra, and then the drums start playing, and then depending on what kind of entities you are calling with the drums and with the singing and so on, and then you have the pretos vellos, the black slaves, and then you have the caboclos, the Indians, and then the children, and then the princes and princesses, which are disguised or transformed into fish or dolphins or trees and so on. So here you have the animistic side of that, and of course for me interested in religion, it was just fantastic, to see all that. Of course, I came from the vegetalista tradition before, in Peru, because I started to do field work in Peru. I use the word field work, which is a typical way anthropologists talk, but of course I went to Peru, to Iquitos, the first time in 1980, not as an anthropologist. I mean, I didn't think that I was going to do any kind of work on anthropology, but I went there interested in the experiences, in the plants, and so what happens is I made a film, which you can see on YouTube. I think you have seen it, Don Emilio and His Little Doctors, which you find it in YouTube. I made a film, but then in the process of making the film, I gathered so much information. Then it became the center, or the kernel of my doctoral dissertation. So I wrote. I was the first who wrote about the concept of plants as teachers. Don Emilio, my teacher, he used to say, ayahuasca is a doctor, but so is toe, and so is tobacco, of course, and so all these other plants, they are doctores, they are beings, So that for me, in a way, that is although I discovered before, when the first time I took yagé, 1971, the concept of a plant as a being, which in fact, I mean, is animism, this idea that everything is alive, everything is intelligent, we are just one intelligence among many others, and then perhaps these plants, what they do is facilitate communication with everything which is around us.
So amazing. So you're coming from Brazil right now. From what I know of you, you were born and you were raised in Colombia, and I believe you were born in the Amazon. Can you take our listeners a bit through your childhood, what that was like growing up for you, just being born in Colombia, what that experience was like? I mean, Colombia is also a very fascinating place in that there's, I think, syncretic element to these different cultures. You have indigenous people there. People came from Africa, from Europe. There's a very interesting flavor there as well. And what was that? What was that like for you growing up?
Well,
And
you know,
maybe what was the thing that it kind of initially sparked that interest in you as well?
okay, well, Colombia is, there are many Colombians in Colombia, like there are many Brazils in Brazil, all these countries which are, in fact, completely, made up by Europeans, like everywhere in the world, Africa and so on, So I'm from the Caquetá region. The Caquetá River runs into the Amazon, and then you have the Amazon, and then you have the Putumayo, and then you have the Caquetá, But I'm close. I was born in Florencia, which is close to the mountains, So it's like the beginning of the Amazon. The Amazon. Um, um, my father was born also in Caquetá, from humble family. My grandmother, apparently traveled through the forest from San Vicente del Caguanin to to Florencia. And Florencia, when I was born, it was there were no cars. Until I was just a child, there were no cars, no electricity, no running water, just horses, and the Indians, the Andoque in the Kamsa, no, I'm sorry, the Ingano, from time to time came. My grandmother had a little shop, when she was selling grain, and my mother was making uh, clothes and hanging them, and just very, very modest. Everything was very modest. My father was working in a bank. He arrived in working for the Banco de la República. He started to work at 7. He just bringing coffee to But then he self-taught. I think that he had only just 2 years of primary school. Self-taught, became, wrote beautifully, and then and went up in the bank structure. Then they was sent out to Medellin and Cali and Bogota and so on. So as a child, I traveled with him. The whole family. We went first to to different places. So so I am Amazonian, but at the same time, I had, since as a child, the experience of these a little bit of the other Colombians. Of course, I was very small. So, but then I was sent to study in Bogota. So, and with a priest, with Escolapios. They are, in English, they are called the Piarist Fathers. Um, and I like them. As a child, I was a good student, and I liked them. And then my mother said, "Oh, perhaps I can give you to God," and put me in a seminary in Bogota when I was 13, and so started a new thing. So study, first, the high school, and then 1 year of philosophy there, and then all my companions, we were a group of something like 21 or 22 in my course, and then everybody left or was thrown out, and so at the end it was me, and then they sent me to Spain. Together with 3 other Colombians, we were sent to Spain. Went to the northern Spain, to Irache, which is near Estella, and Estella is near Pamplona, just to have an idea about where it is in Spain. And then there is study philosophy, and then to Irache, which is a monastery in La Rioja, the wine producing area, and then study philosophy and 1 year of theology. The good thing there is that they have a pretty good library, although it was very restricted, what books you could read. But I became a librarian, so I have my little table and chair inside the library. So I spent 2 years there reading, reading as much as I could, you know. And then I also um, um, became aware that it was very restrictive, be in this situation with the Escolapios, very uninteresting intellectually, because there was not much big conversation. It's very much, you follow a very, very sure path. You study theology, you study Thomas Aquinas, and that's it. And which is very interesting. I mean, I learned a lot, of course, about the worldview of Christianity, and especially in Catholicism and so on. But for me, I wanted more. so so at some point, I don't get into it. It was the Concilium Vatican II. We were allowed for the first time from the monastery. We went sent to the Pyrenees, the mountains between Spain and France. I have learned. I spoke English, some English when I arrived to Spain, but then in Irach and Albelda, in Spain, French was compulsory, and so I learned French. I realized that I have a good ear for languages. I learned many languages in my life, and so and I became the guide of the monastery. It was a beautiful monastery from the oldest part from the 12th century, and all the so we were sent to this colony in the Pyrenees. We took out the habit, the black thing, that I was carrying for 2.5 years. And then I felt, my goodness, I'm so close to France. I would like to hear French. I mean, I would like to be there. And as permission to hitchhike without any money. The idea was that I would go to Lourdes, the Virgin of Lourdes. So it was a very sacred place. A very good idea to go to Lourdes. And then I was hitchhiking, and at the end of the night, it was too late to continue. I was traveling with another Colombian. He said, "No, I'm going back to the colony, because we got permission for 24 hours." And I said, "No, I'm too close. I continue," and then continue. And a car took me to Paul, and there I couldn't sleep because the guy, he was a famous musician. I learned later, Paul Ogne, fagot, he played in the Le Vin Français in Paris, it was famous. But anyway, he was going to Paris. And that night I could not sleep, thinking that this guy was going to Paris. And for me, Paris, of course, is the capital of everything. The Louvre, is philosophy, art, and so on. And I wrote to the head of the monastery, "I'm in this situation," and said, "I'm going to Paris, and I will go back immediately. I will just one day in Paris, and I go back." But I answer, I finished my letter with the sentence, which was, of course, at that time in Spain, it was like a bomb. I just wrote, "La vie est belle," life is beautiful. And of course, at that context, Paris, was the capital of sin, Uh, 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 so when I went to Paris, I spent 2 days there, hungry because I have no money. Managed to hitch back. I was immediately sent from the colony to Albelda de Iregua, and from Albelda de Iregua to Madrid, and then came a letter from Rome, and I was out of the order, and I was very happy about it. Then I have to survive and manage to get another job, horrible jobs, and so on, and study in Madrid. So my first education is in Madrid, and then I studied literature. I like to. At the time, I wrote a lot of poetry. I have poet friends and so on, and so my education is in that sense. Literature, linguistics, art, philosophy. Then the thing is that I was in a religious organization, and you study philosophy, and then it was Franco time, Franco time, dictator, everybody, the students, I mean, the thing you have to read Karl Marx, you have to, you know, and then I became a militant atheist in a way, and all this was dissolved in 1971 when I went back for holidays to Colombia, to Florencia, and then one of the first days I was there, I don't remember why I went to a place, to take a coffee or something, and there I met Terrance McKenna. He was there with his girlfriend, and trying to order something in terrible Spanish. And so I came in and asked him, may I help you? And that sentence changed everything for me, because then, he told me about yagé, about La Chorrera, about his experiences and so on. So he was about to go to Peru. In fact, that meeting changed a lot of, I mean, of course, every little thing changes everything else in the future, it's just like that, But that encounter changed a lot of things, because Terrence was going to Peru. If he had been going to Peru at that time, 1971, he would have seen perhaps for sure the ayahuasca tradition, and it will be something else, but then he went. My father told me, yagé, there is yagé here. He went to Bogota, went back to Florencia, and then we spent 2.5 months together, just reading, talking, 2.5, and then I realized the importance of these things, We had an experience together with Yagé that we got through a German guy who knew a Hungarian guy who had been with the Indians and so on, and knew Apolinar, and we had our first experience with Yagé. And for me, the thing is, what is this? What is this? I was interested in philosophy, so how is this possible? How to put it there in a worldview, and then I went back to then I moved to Norway, and in '73 I went to see Terrence in Berkeley. It was still the counterculture, so I was embedded also in a way in the California vibe and all that, going up and down Telegraph Street and buying books, and Shakespeare's and Moe's and secondhand books, very cheap, and it was whole universe, and it was Watergate as well, and then Terrence, he had many interesting friends from all disciplines that we used to get together there and watch TV, black and white old TV that Terrence had. He hated TV, but it was the only thing. We were watching Watergate. All the hearings and so on, and smoking pot and then talking about everything. So there was another kind of education that I had, and went back to Oslo with 20 kilos of books, and my head was interested in so many things, So, yeah.
Amazing life. I mean, even from studying philosophy and religion, and I mean, at your age now, do you ever look back and kind of look at something like that, like this chance encounter in your homeland in a cafe where Terrance McKenna comes in and you just happen to be there, and the series of events that lead up to that? I mean, do you ever reflect on that, on maybe a
Of
bigger
course.
divine order? And
No, of course, yeah. I mean, of course. The thing is that I think that everybody, does. When you look back into your life, you begin to see the path, and then if you pay attention, there are always a lot of synchronicities. It's just a question of attention, For instance, I mean, just to think of a couple of interesting synchronicities that made me think that perhaps this was the path that I should follow, remember that Terrence told me, or somebody told me, read this book. what's called, um, uh, play in the fields of the Lord, because ayahuasca, has a play, and there was a film, also with a bottle of ayahuasca and a Chinese Indian jump and arrive, jump with what is called parapluie. No, it's called from an airplane. I forgot the now the
Parachute.
word.
He parachutes down.
Parachute,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then into Indians, and okay. So and then the thing, the name of the guy. This book was written in '65. I took yagé for the first time in '71. But the name of the character is Louis Moon. When I arrived to Scandinavia, everybody called me Luis Luna. Eduardo was a little bit too long, so it's Luis Luna. So Louis Moon, is a guy. And then by chance, I was working in Oslo, teaching literature and study science as well. Um, so I was not never given a job, I was teaching literature, but paid by the hour, and of course my mind was into all these other things, So I was studying science at the same time, giving lectures in Latin American literature or in Spanish history and so on. So they convinced me that I should study some linguistics, so that I would fit more into the department. And at the end, I never got. I didn't get the job when there was in a position open. I never got it, and I was, of course, furious because I had been working 7 years. I have many students, and I was a good teacher, and say I'm getting out of here. And then by chance, one of my colleagues told me, there's some. It seems that they are looking for somebody in Finland as a Spanish teacher in Finland. So I went to the Spanish embassy and saw the letter written in Swedish. Wait, it was in yes, it was in Swedish, and then looking for a teacher and then a contact. I spoke Norwegian at the time because I was teaching literature there, and so I made a call. The guy spoke Swedish and I spoke Norwegian, but they are very similar. You can understand each other. So I said, okay, come here. And I went to Helsinki to the Swedish School of Economics, Svenska Handelsskolan. And then I continued my interest in these things. And then suddenly, when I was looking at literature, I saw a name from time to time, Rafael Gasten. One of the pioneer, in fact, because he's the first one who wrote about these things, about ayahuasca. He was doing work in the 20s and 30s in Ecuador, and he wrote a book called Headhunters of the Amazon, and then other books. So then I said, well, it must be Swedish. And then my English colleague, said, look, there are some books here because there was somebody who was interested in these things. He was a Spanish teacher before you were here. And he was Rafael Caster. Rafael Caster had been teaching Spanish. I was having his job, And so from the pioneer, in the 20s, somebody doing the 20s and the 30s, here in 33, I knew that because there is a book, he was there, his name was there. He was professor in sociology, but went to Ecuador, went to Peru, wrote a book about the Incas and so on. So I found myself that I was having cheese chair, So I continued this kind of work, And I met also later on his daughter and so on. So in a way, I see that there is a certain path for me. I don't know why, and but I ended up in Florianopolis, and I was born in Florencia, and then the town right here is called Santo Antonio, and the little town where I took Yahed for the first time with Terrance was called San Antonio, and all these little things, you begin to wonder, what is this, But I think that everybody thinks at some point, Is our life already written by somebody? Are we characters in some kind of fantasy? What is all about?
Yeah, amazing. So when you were growing up in Kakota, you know, these days things like ayahuasca, yagé, it's much more in the common vernacular. But did you have any sense that the Indians of that time were doing something mysterious or involved, or it was just a completely foreign concept?
Nothing. Because I mean, I was interested in the Indians, but I was not interested at that time. I was a child. I was interested because they have a hole in the nose. And they put feathers here, and I was interested to see whether you can see the light on the other side of the nose. So I was interested and always interested in what other people think. When I was a child, and they asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" People say I'm firefighter or a pilot or whatever, not medical doctor. I used to say I want to be a foreigner. And I became a foreigner all my life, because I've been living here in Brazil, but I'm Colombian. So it was, so I've been a foreigner since I'm 18. So, so at that time, no, nothing was no, because even though the Indians went there to Florencia, they were thought of as, just the Indians. In fact, in Colombia, I don't know nowadays, probably things have changed. But when I was living in Colombia, to tell somebody Indio, it was an insult. And when I went to Bogota to study to the school, but I was discriminated sometimes, because I come from, they were asking me, did they manage to get you out of the forest with mirrors, So, but at the same time, it was this lack of interest and knowledge of the Indians. And this is what had happened in history. I used to say when, living in Spain so many years, I had many Spanish friends. I used to say, because they said, the Spanish discovered America. And I used to say, they never discovered America. They invaded America, but they didn't discover America because they didn't discover, what was going on in the minds of all these people, all these cultures, all these languages, everything that we lost, It's terrible to think, that within 150 years of contact, 95 to 98% of the population of the Americas just disappeared. Languages, hundreds of languages totally disappear. So we have some objects, interesting ones, very interesting, probably related to shamanism. I mean, you can see, for instance, in the Marajo, in the ceramics, very intricate patterns, and you wonder what were they into, And of course, now I'm totally convinced, that well, I mean, totally convinced that we cannot understand the Americas from Canada to Tierra del Fuego without reference to these kind of plants, including, of course, tobacco. And tobacco, as you know, is a very powerful plant, So we cannot understand the Americas without reference to other, to modified state of consciousness, I mean, this was the continent when there was big experimentation about consciousness, and especially the Amazon. The Amazon, these people, because they live in a place, for the first, as you know, most of the Amazon, there is no stone, no rocks, a rock is a rarity in some areas, in rock it was, and now reading some journeys into the Amazon of other people, and in some areas, just to have a stone, it will be like for us a jewel, because it's so strange, because, So what they did, everything, you have civilizations there made of wood, which disappear completely. But they have ceramics, and when we have, they have the oldest ceramics in the Americas are in the Amazon. So you have these figures, and you have to figure out what is behind, And then you have the huge areas of experimentation, the terra preta, which you have huge areas of extremely fertile soil, with millions of microorganisms, a living soil in the Amazon, where the topsoil is just a few centimeters, and all the biomass is above. So these people were highly sophisticated, We lost it. We lost. We have only a few myths, collected by fantastic people that thought of it in time. I mean, Richard Dolmatoff, there is one of, in a way, one of my mentors, even though I spoke with him only twice, but it was enough, and I received one letter from him, which changed me the direction, in a way, he was the first one who was talking about the philosophy of the Indians, the Indians as thinkers, and so on. So I follow, in a way, the path of Raisa Dolmatov, and then my other teachers, I was lucky to meet Schultes. I spent time in his home, I had my room there, and I was using his library, and I met everyone. I mean, Gordon Wasson and Shulgin and then Hoffman and Gordon Wasson and then Peter Forst, Johannes Wilber, who was the great specialist in tobacco and so on. So I was lucky that I had my academic mentors at the same time that I have my indigenous and the mestizo mentors. So I was, in a way, lucky that I was educated on both sides. So, and that's what I try to do in my normal life, is to bring together what I know, what I learned from the indigenous people and the mestizo, and I myself mestizo. I just found out that I'm 31% indigenous, So I'm very proud of that side of myself, And then I have the science, and I have the library. We have a big library here, and we have the botanical garden. So we have over 400 species of plants here around. So so I made my little forest here, So
I think that's an amazing way to reflect upon a culture, because we often reflect upon cultures in something physical, and to look at a culture in a different lens, that there can be a culture through a different cosmovision, through a different worldview. And I very much think you're correct in that deep questioning that was most likely induced by various plants and practices. I think there's a lot more evidence beginning to come out, but I think a lot of people still aren't familiar with that fact that as you said, between 90 to 98% of the indigenous population was wiped out relatively quickly
very quickly.
upon contact. Do you have any sense of kind of, as you begin to piece together a view of the Americas, of what that looked like? Because I think if you extrapolated that to any other area, if you were to wipe out 98% of the population, you would have a collapse. There would essentially be nothing left, which means there must have been something quite special that was here before that contact.
I mean, it is amazing that so many survived, and many things survived. That's the beautiful thing, that in spite of this catastrophe, still, there is something still there in these people. It's amazing that they were able to make it, with all the, I mean, can you imagine losing, I mean, 98% of the population, what the 2%, all the institutions, all the social institutions, everything collapsed. And then you have these people, and then you have the missionaries telling you about the Christianity and the cross and this and that, and you are in a position of inferiority because you're down there in the social, in the bottom and so on. And still amazing. But what was America? I recommend, there is a very good book, which I have here. It's written by a journalist, a very good one. 1491.
That's an
That's a
amazing book.
very
Yeah.
interesting overview of the Americas, and he did a very good work. In fact, it was through him the first time that I realized about the terra preta and all this, and the new work on by archaeologists on the Amazon. Now we know that the Amazon was populated by at least 10 million people, if not more. Perhaps much more. Now, so when you begin to see where are the signs of culture, advanced culture, nearly everywhere you find a stone, you find something, something, the petroglyphs, along the Amazon, and then places like Huerequeteque in Colombia or La Lindosa, studied by Uruguayan Juan. I forgot his name. Anyway, so you find marvelous things, So what was the Americas? Difficult to imagine, but it is a great loss for all of us, because the America was an experiment which was totally separated from the Eurasian experiment, So, and in a way, as I don't remember now his name. It's too early for me. Jer something. The Americas are located. The axis is north to south, and Eurasia east to west, or yes. So it's like this. So along the Eurasia continent, ideas and plants and animals travel easily, because you have the domestication of animals, all came from Asia, and came the horses and the pigs and the chickens from even farther away, and so on. So, but anyway, and the plants, the wheat and all the plants, very easily travel. America is north to south. So it has to go through so many different layers, of climates and so on. And in every place, they were able to domesticate, for instance. That's what, plants, And it's amazing, you have the Mesoamerica, you have in Mississippi, as well, another center for cultivation of the Andes, of course, Mesoamerica and so, and the Amazon. And interesting thing, the Amazon was the oldest. It was about 10,000 years of domestication of animals. Many of the plants that we were early thought that they were Mesoamericans, like cacao. Now we know, cacao is Amazonian. The old evidence we have from Ecuador. Corn, corn is Amazonian as well. We have it in Colombia. And so on, and so many. So what was the Amazon? That's the great question. Because the Amazon is, on the other hand, is an anthropogenic forest. It was made by human beings, to a great extent. You see when you make a study of the numbers of species. You see that the 25 more used species are concentrated in places. So you see that they have been carried out, by human beings. They have been moving the plants around, creating forest islands on the plains, and creating forests of all the ecosystems, islands of ecosystems within the Amazon, and so on. So these people were highly sophisticated, and they knew so many things, special plans so that you are able to keep your blowgun, in place that you don't, so plans that give you the vision at night, so that you are able, your pupils open up and you get all the possible light there, and so on and so on and so on. It's this, the enormous knowledge. And so I used to think that when you compare Eurasia and the Americas, in Eurasia you have the animals, the domestication of animals and so on, who brought the diseases to human beings. A lot of the illnesses are just because of, domestication of animals. So it was a big mistake there. And we know now the big mistake, because the cattle are eating our forests, I mean, and destroying ecosystems and so on, has been doing for a long time. But then in the Americas, you had the plant knowledge, which was huge just because there were so many different ecosystems, and they domesticated and were able to use the land up in the Andes, at 4,000 meters, making terraces to plant. Potatoes were domesticated around the Titicaca Lake, at 4,000 meters high up, At the same time, all these other plants, 2/3 of the plants that we eat today in the world are originally from the Americas. So again, the Europeans didn't discover America. They raped America. They invade America. They took whatever their inventions and all, back into Europe but they didn't discover America because they didn't understand, what was behind, behind this creativity and, so, yeah.
You mentioned that this first yagé experience you had was with Terrance. I would imagine with your interest and already having been in Europe and different parts of the world, having been in a Christian, a Catholic setting, I mean, there must have been some spark in you that was looking, maybe whether you were conscious or not, of something of divinity. Was that first experience of yagé? Did that was that like a key that began to open up something for you to look in a different way? I mean, because it seems like that was quite a pivotal moment for you.
Yes, I mean, from the point of view of I was thinking about about this matter, about memory. When you have a memory of you have an ayahuasca sessions or you have taken immersions, and then you have the memory of what happens, but then the memory, perhaps the picture is there more or less, but the emotions are not there anymore, and so much is the emotion. That and I have written about the ayahuasca visions and this and that. Okay, that's what we can get, somehow to refer to these places, but the emotions are not replicable. So, and these moments of emotion. So, what I remember, it was more European in a way. What I saw, my first Yahé, it was the Geronimus Bosque. It was the Garden of Delights. It was that kind of world. But of course, I've been to museums and all that, and I love art, and so, and there was my reference. It was the European, reference, and then Terrance was talking about DNA because they were thinking, the harmony with intercalated DNA would radiate the whole, Terrance's rap, which is fantastic as a fiction, but many things are okay, there's the thing, you find again this kind of in and out of rationality or way of thinking, and this other world, these other things that are happening there, which are the synchronicities and all that, which belong to another realm, and I used to say, that Descartes divided the world into two, rex cogitans, and rex extensa you can measure, and of course the res cogitans is God and the angels and the archangels and the human beings and nothing else, nothing else here, because all the rest from Descartes were just machines, The animals were machines, and the plants were machines and so on. So, and then you have the rex extensa you can measure, Okay, you have these two things, but there is something more than that. And then I used to say, I would call it the Rex Fantastica, the fantastic thing. Rex Cogita is the thing that thinks, the Rex Extensa, the thing that you can measure, So I used to say the Rex Fantastica, the rest that is something else. Now a friend of mine, using in his work, Jeff Kripal, or Kripal, I don't know, it's pronounced Kripal or Kripal. We call it the imaginal, not imagination, but the imaginal. And I think that this is what happens, that you have the imaginal is working all the time, but we don't pay attention because we are too busy with all this, in the dreams, and that's very important for the indigenous people. It's something that we have completely forgotten, or not pay attention. The importance of dreams, when Don Emilio, I was asking Don Emilio, how do you know that this plant is a doctor? He said, in the dreams they reveal themselves. So you have the imaginal, and I think what happens when you take this yagé or other plants, somehow, you know, okay, using, the Huxley's, the open the gates of perception. I think it opens to the imaginal, and the imaginal is so vast and diverse because it's influenced by your personal life, and it's influenced by your culture, it is influenced by your what you read, and all this, it reveals itself, somehow, and so therefore, although there are themes of which are common in certain experiences, but each of us, we are opening to our own imaginary, and of course, like you and me, we have, we don't have a common cosmology. We are the the sum of everything that we have experienced, and people are, we have experienced a lot because this world is just amazing, information and so on. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably read maybe some of the work of Stephen Harold Buhner. I think he's one of the great Western plant doctors, but he wrote a beautiful book called, I believe it's called Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm. And
Yeah.
I remember reading that book, and it very much transported me to a different place that's very hard to describe. But I think one of the beautiful bridges of that kind of work. You were mentioning earlier on that this book and eventually movie At Play in the Fields of the Lord, and I remember that had a big actually impact on me as a child
Oh,
watching that.
really?
But it was very interesting because I still remember today the word that they used for what's usually commonly labeled as ayahuasca was nippy, and that was
Nippy.
never a
Yeah.
term that I had any reference to. But I know that that's obviously a big part of your work. It's something you focused on through the documentary with Don Emilio and your experiences with yagé, with ayahuasca. You spent time with the shipibo. That plant or that plant brew that is commonly called ayahuasca, and it has so many names in so many different indigenous traditions. But I think so many people listening to this podcast now are familiar with that plant. But I think also a lot of the focus has come now through a specific maybe culture or lens or way of working with that. And I always think it's so fascinating, people like yourself who came to it maybe earlier than many other people, because I think these things also begin to change when culture begins to adopt it, and even how we look at something or label or put it into our societies. What was that journey like for you? I mean, I know you mentioned you experienced Yahé with Terrance, and then you spent time with Don Emilio, who was a mestizo vetelista, looking at it through that lens. I believe you also spent time with the Shipibo and doing dieta and seeing it through that lens. But it's a huge subject, a huge question, but is that something you can speak about a bit more? Because even this insight that you had about dreams, I think it's something that's so rarely spoken about or understood, and yet for so many of the indigenous people who work with ayahuasca or these other master plants, tobacco, toe, the dream space is so much that this space that these plants can give us access to, which again is not necessarily different from our dream space. It's just most of us are cut off from that. But can you, and again, this is maybe a big question kind of flowing, but just maybe to speak more about ayahuasca, because again, a lot of the audience is familiar with it, but there's still people who aren't so familiar with it too, and just what's been your experience and maybe even over the years how that's changed for you.
Okay, so let's first start with the botany, because you say ayahuasca. Okay, ayahuasca will be the combination of Banisteriopsis capi and Psychotria viridis. That is what is mostly used in Peru. Nowadays, now they also brought a plant. I know the story of this plant, how it came to Iquitos, which is Diplopterus cabrerana, which is yagé. You know, so yagé is the combination of the two vines, those two Malpighiaceae vines, but then the yagé contains the DMT, as Psychotria contains DMT. So we have, but we have to think, we have to be aware that this is already a simplification because there are many varieties of Banisteriopsis. And there are many other admixture plants. And even within Psychotria, there are also varieties. You have Carthaginensis, you have Pepigiana, and so on. So it's a complex. It's a big complex. And then you can add many other things and so on. So it's a huge complex. So, in a way, thinking like that, that ayahuasca seems like to be, or the Banisteriopsis, the vine seems to be like something that you add to and opens gates, Somehow it lets you, so it's like a highway, and then you have many other plants there, So, and of course, the Indians use many beautiful metaphors, the vine, because the way it grows, well, it's a huge serpent. And the serpent in certain mythology is very important, I was recently with a Unikuni, Charanawa woman who was painting her face, and then I was asking, so what is this? This is the Shiboya, the big serpent, and then the jaguar and so on. And then she was telling me, because the jiboya, is the mother of all the visions there, and so is on the chipibo. All the visions are in the skin of the jiboya. Okay, ayahuasca is like the jiboya, or you see the jiboya, and then ayahuasca also is the metaphor of the river, that branches out and communicates you with everything else, all the whole Amazon area and beyond. And so at the same time, the ayahuasca vine, the vine is among the Kansai is considered like the umbilical cord, So when we are in the womb of our mothers, we are connected to our universe is the placenta, there's the whole thing there. Then we are cut off, and then ayahuasca will be like a new umbilical cord, putting you in connection with everything. So I think that this idea is the most important. So what is the ayahuasca experience like? It all depends, on your moment in time, the plants they are using, so the combination, and the person who does it as well, who prepares it, Once I was in the Purus River in Brazil, and I was going to the heart of the Santo Daime, Seudumapia, to Mapia, and then we stopped in a place where there was a man preparing ayahuasca, and he was sitting at some distance and alone. So I came to talk to him and I sat by him, and he was looking at the fire, preparing the ayahuasca, and he said, this is my teacher, and my teacher, and I have to, whatever I learn from from the fire, I have to give it to other people. If you don't do it, then it will stop giving you the information. So in a way, information has to flow through you, and this idea of the flowing energy, and so on, you find in Rice Dolmatoff energy and so on. So, and then he was telling me people used to say that ayahuasca is two plants. So yeah, you have two plants, but you have the water that you boil in it, you have the wood that you are using to prepare it, and then you have the air, and then you have the thoughts and the intentions of the people who are preparing it, and it's all there in the ayahuasca. And then of course when you take it, it is your own intention, your own, the setting and so on. So it's all very, very complex, and so we have to be aware of all that, and then of course the experience may change into this or that, depending also to what you are at the moment interested in, or or what are your emotions, your relationship, and so on. So it's a teacher that will, show you very often what you need. It's like kind of mirror. Say, look, this is what is happening now. Be careful. Be careful with your ego. Careful. Don't. Pablo Amaringo has some paintings in which the vegetalista is on a throne, with a crown and giving, and the angel says everything is about you, and I say, that is the big, dangerous game that you think that you are, that you're suddenly the center of attention of the spirit world. That's a big mistake. Mm.
You did this beautiful documentary about Don Emilio, and I remember when I watched it, it reminded me a lot of my mestizo teacher. I mean, even like the Charapa, the Amazonian Spanish, they spoke very slow. And what was that like? I mean, because again, I would imagine all of these experiences, they begin to affect your cosmovision, how you see the world. I mean, it's maybe a bit more accepted now, but I mean, it's still a very fringe way of looking at the world, that plants can be teachers, that plants have doctors, that you can access that information. I mean, it still sounds very, very woo-woo, very new agey, very out there. Um, how do you begin viewing that? Like, how does that begin to kind of permeate you and to affect you? Because, and I would imagine at that time, I can't remember the date that you made that, but even today, that's quite a far out theory, but at that time, even more so. What was that? What was that like for you going through that experience? I mean, was that something you were able to begin to adopt or to see things from another lens? What was that process like for you?
I would say that the main thing is that I took them seriously. I mean, I was not thinking that they are in any way, exotic or, and no less. No, no, I took them seriously. They were telling me these things and I took them seriously. And I had some experiences that in a way confirmed that. Now, was it for me, what I was interested in, it was I was doing my work, let's say field work, because anyway, I was going to see my teachers, in the summer, when I have holidays in Finland. So I was lucky that I have 3 months of holidays per year, and I could dedicate that time, uh, partially to make money to be able to do to go there, and so. But then when I going back to Finland, which is totally the opposite in everything, very cold, very dark, during the time when you are teaching, there is nothing else to do then just read and think, and and then go through all this and typing at the time, typewriter, and typing about this, thinking about that. So I was moving between the two worlds, you know and which is very good, because I used to say that, um, um, if you have a circle and just a circle and nothing else than a circle, you look at it, okay, you have a certain amount of information about that. But if you put a square at the side, then you begin to see, compare, you see, suddenly you realize why this is like this and this is like that. Then you begin to, information comes out, you know. So I think that this has been very good for me to go in and out many times, so that I was able, of course, I started in 1980, and then I never stopped, going to the Amazon until 95 or something like that, So for me, holidays meant going to Peru, you know. Well, in other places, when I started with Pablo Amaringo and so on. But anyway, let's go back to you put the question in a way that how was it like, what the way of
I
thinking,
think just beginning to take this very foreign cosmovision, that a
yeah,
plant could be a
okay,
doctor or mhm.
right, okay. Well, for me, it became quickly like almost evident, because there are things that happened. I mean, okay, just one example. I was going to see Don Emilio. You have to take a truck, and you never know when it's going there because it depends. It has to be full before you go there, and then there was a woman, a family, and the woman was moaning. It was the father and the son, and they were going to Don Emilio. So I came down from the truck with them. Don Emilio saw her, and he used to, something which the doctor should learn. The first thing he did was to make her laugh, jokes and things like that, so that, down with the anxiety, just try to relax first thing. And they say, okay, tonight we are going to, I'm going to work with you, just stay there. It was already late to wait some hours, and then we have the ceremony. He did some kind of work with her, extracting, pirote and so on. And that night on the roof, there was like some bird, doing a big noise up there, for a long time. And I said, wow, what is this, The next morning, Don Emilio said, the witch that caused the illness, he was there and he was there, Okay, then you see, that from the Western point of view, you can say, wow, there was this bird, I don't know, perhaps it was a rat or something, and was doing this, From them, it was just logical, within the world. Well, yes, of course, the witch was here, and, I have to fight him, and he went away. But then when you experience this, their explanation makes much more sense than the Western explanation that by chance some bird was, chasing a rat there. I mean, you can see that it fits within certain kind of logic. And then you see that the people get well. You can see, Don Emilio was healing a person who could not talk, and after the session, he was able to talk, and I recorded him. So it is happening. It is happening. So we have to take it as serious as as what the Western scientists may say. I mean, it is so. So I took them seriously, and I was trying to understand from that point of view, what is happening. And then I was looking at myself as well. How I was incorporating that kind of way of thinking, and while at the same time I was keeping my scientific mind, in a way, and try to bridge, and I think that that's what I have been doing in a way, is to bridge somehow that kind of worldview with this one, and it makes more and more sense for me, because now I can see that from the concept of plant teachers, of intelligent beings and so on, then you look into the biology. And then you have more and more studies of showing not only the intelligence of animals, of course, the primates, and then dolphins, and then now we know the octopus and so on. But then you see the intelligence is everywhere, down into the microbial world. So you start to get into this, and then you see that, I mean, there is no contradiction here. The Western mind has been able to, in a way, because it's interested in how things are done, and is trying to look into mechanism, into the primordial entities and so on, blah blah blah. You are like a focus, into this thing, but you lose. That's the problem. You lose this other idea, which of the intelligence of everything, which the indigenous people have. So I think that we have to combine these two ways of thinking. Is in a way, it's like the periphery vision, which is not the peripheral vision is completely different from the focus. What is called the focus. I forgot the name, in which you focus on the very tiny little space in time. In space. Because. But then you read, and then you create a picture. But the periphery, and this is very exact, in the place where there is the focus, but most of it we build a picture from our own experience and memory and so on. and then you have the peripheral field. So we need both, in a way. This is the game, And the indigenous people were great scientists because you don't create something like terra preta without very, very exact, attention to details and knowledge and all that. I mean, the 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 knowledge, the scientific knowledge which is behind terra preta or something like that is huge. It's huge. Only that they use different language, and so we have to combine. And what I see is that nowadays it is not any longer so far out if you explain it, if you put it together with what evolutionary biology is showing us. So there is no intelligence goes all the way down, and that's what they say, that that in the way of looking at things, everything is a person. We are we are they are the non-human person or more than human person. They're all there. They recognize this now. The science, the biologists, if you look into this, and you go from the little pictures here and there into the totality, and you realize the whole ecosystem, is a lot of intelligence, interaction everywhere, and so these two worlds are not so very different. So what is different is our very narrow way of looking at things, but at the moment you begin to see that your own culture, the Western science, can show all this, then there is no. So the gap is closing, and my hope is that it will, merge, because also the indigenous people, what they are interested in, they are using cell phones. Now I am so lucky that I can call people from many areas of the Brazilian Amazon. We have a group, we have a WhatsApp group, and so you can know what's happening in the Xingu and there, and then, it's fantastic, So if we merge these two things, and we have full respect to the knowledge and protect their land and respect the boundaries, whatever they have left and so on. I mean, my goodness, all of us, we have to somehow remedy that disaster that started in 1492, in which the whole experiment disappeared, almost disappeared. There were two civilizatory experiments, completely separated apparently, all except for little things perhaps, but two civilizatory experiments developed at the same time with a big ocean in between, so it's fantastic, so we lost our sister, experiment, and whatever we have left with, thanks to the indigenous people, we have to recover that somehow and make it all us, and make it personal. I mean, in my case, of course, I'm 31% indigenous, so it is my obligation, to learn from my ancestors, those ancestors. The other side is European. Okay, well, I mean, I get whatever they come from that side as well, and put it together. So that is in a way my work. It's just trying to put together and then bring many different worldviews. Here in Ayahuasca, we organize just 1 or 2 seminars per year nowadays, bringing people from many disciplines, having the experience using it as a tool, as a cognitive tool, as a tool for getting into, and not necessarily with a certain view. I think that it's dangerous if you begin to put categories of the sacred of the Western world into that, because this is more animistic. It's more, it's nature itself. I used to say, they ask me, "What is your religion?" And I say, "My religion is my garden. That's my religion. There are all these beings there, which are around me, So."
What do you can you speak a bit more about that? Because I think that's a really fascinating subject. I mean, I think you were very, maybe not unique, but very much, maybe you could say, a pioneer in that this kind of anthropological work you were doing because traditionally it was very objective based. It was there was a big gap between the observer and the observed, and I think what you were doing was really beginning to merge that gap and to make it more subjective as well, and to be able to see things from another worldview, from another cosmovision. Can you speak maybe a bit more about what that role is of kind of bridging that gap? And then at the same time, I think it's really interesting what you just said, because I think on the other hand, then conversely, potentially also what can happen is we can, even from a subjective place, we can take that experience and simply try and translate it through our worldview and come up with another worldview that perhaps isn't actually the worldview of the person that was trying to be kind of
Yeah.
understood in the first place.
Okay. Um, I think that I was very lucky that I didn't study anthropology. And it was Richard Dolmatoff who wrote to me. Richard Dolmatoff, I don't know, remember what I wrote to him. And he said, you excuse me if I will give you an advice, a sincere advice. Study science, study botany, study, other sciences, you know and not to be able to fall into the confusion that very often happens. Okay, of course, we are in the time of Carlos Castañeda, the teachers of Don Juan, which, of course, influenced me very much. It was Terrance told me, read this one, and so, and so, um, so I was lucky that I went there as an explorer, not as an anthropologist. So therefore, I didn't go with the Western way of looking at things of subject and object, and you are an observer, and you are going to the objective. No, my relationship, my cognitive relationship from the very beginning was interrelational. In which subjects to subject. Not subject and object. I didn't put Don Emilio as an object to be studied, there, or use, he thinks and no, he became my friend, my father in a way, a spiritual father, so we merged, so we took it many times, sometimes, and even, I have situations which are so beautiful in which one night the ayahuasca was very, very strong, and Don Emilio was there vomiting and I was here, and then, but we just looked at each other, but didn't say anything, The next day we were laughing about it, about last night. It was really difficult, So okay, well, it was not, so we, from the very beginning, it was this kind of, so I was lucky, in a way that I was able to escape a lot of the structure which is built into the academic world. So I've been a self-taught person, almost all my life. So I got a PhD in comparative religion, but I never went to one single class. I just talking to the teachers. The teachers told me to read these books, and I read the books. 2 months or 3 months later, I went back and we had a conversation. And after 4 years, because I defended my doctoral dissertation before I did any formal studies of religion, comparative religion, so it's all self-taught, and so I was lucky, that in a way I have been always open, not let myself into structures, and I used to say, pity I don't have it here, but I will bring it, because I like this comparison. In just a moment, I'm going to bring a poster. All right. So yeah, I find this very interesting. Okay, you can ask it, what do you see here? And then you see, and then you concentrate on a certain pattern, which is there. Yes, but it's not the only pattern there. And then you can read it so many different ways, and you see different patterns, and you can organize it, in a way, in one or another way. But the big mistake is to say that pattern, that particular pattern, is the right one, you know. So remember once that I was having a person with some difficulties, after the session, and he was telling me about growth, and he was saying that, okay, I am in the, I don't remember now, the stage 2, and I remember now the exact terminology that growth uses, and in which you are trying to get out, and you're about to be born, and you are pressed, and this is this situation, you are, it's a stage in birth, and then with the holotropic rhetoric, you go through all that. And then I was telling this person, be careful, because you are got now into that system of growth system, and I'm in that space. Just change your pattern, do something else, and then you suddenly realize that you are not in that one. You may be in many other places. Depending on your way of thinking, of your idea of the world. So I think that we are multiple. And that's the beautiful thing with the imaginal, it's infinite. In fact, I think, it's an infinite way of looking at it. Cultures, that's what cultures are, so many different, and I think that Terrance used to say that be careful with cultures, because then you get stuck into that, So, divinity, what is divinity? It's going to be very interesting, because in some months, in 3 months, we are going to have here a group of people, religious leaders, from different confessions, and and then how can you somehow, within your frame, or ideological frame, how you are going to explain this, and then you will have different ways, and perhaps in this way you understand that, my goodness, okay, well, this is one way, but that's also as well, I mean, ideological wars and religious wars and all that is, very often, meaningless. I mean, once you see the big picture, then you say, we have to, adjust things, because things are not simply that. It's not that book or that book or that myth, It's perhaps all of it. So
It's yeah, I think that's really vital. I think one of the things in that same thread that's happening, and obviously everything has two sides. There's a real benefit as these plants leave places like the jungle and begin to spread more to the Western world. There's many drawbacks of that as well. But as this work begins to spread, I think one thing that's kind of seen is this kind of quote unquote psychedelic renaissance of people rediscovering these things, but it's also being used in, as you said, a very specific model, much like that mandolin. It's very much seen as, even we use this word medicine, like, and that conjures a very particular worldview, usually a medical model, something to treat a physical ailment. Even in a psychological sense, there's beautiful work, I think, being done with war veterans, and Johns Hopkins has done some beautiful work. But even that, it's seen in a very psychological model. It's often incorporated into the work of psychiatry, psychology, Freud, Jung. So always that's going to be limiting. And in general, when you speak to indigenous people, it's changing a bit. They may be more familiar with those kind of archetypes or ways of looking at things. But often when people come from the outside, they're a bit shocked in the way that the indigenous people where these plants come from speak of these plants, their uses, their meaning, the cosmovision. Can you speak a bit to that of maybe your experience more with the people who've been working with these plants traditionally versus how you see these plants beginning to move out into the more of the mainstream public?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have been a little bit. Well, I have not been studying, and I have not been, but about the medicalization of these things. Okay, I know some psychologists have been here with us, and I understood. And I was reading a lot about that in the beginning, but somehow, okay, big difference between, let's say, having a patient, that you already have a patient, you already have a label there, a patient who is suffering from PTSD or depression. You have a patient on a sofa, and then you have a psychologist there who is holding your hand in case, and you have a goggles, and you're totally isolated, and you have somebody who plays the music, and you have a medical doctor there just in case something happens. I mean, first, extremely expensive. You have to have the attention of all these people, highly qualified people, who have big salaries, to take care of one person, and and then the person who is giving you the medicine is not able to take it, because it's not allowed, So you are not. So you have the subject object thing, You have the object there, the patient there, You have here, you are there in case of something happens, So there is no community, there is no nature, You are completely isolated, visually, from everything else. It's completely different from a ceremony in forest or in a place where you see plants, and then you have a community, and then the leader, of course, will take it, take as well the medicine, because it works in this way, that you have to be in that space. If you're completely out, you are not able to go into the internal space of other people, at least very difficult. So this is the way to, so it's a completely different models. It's the subject object model, the subject model, with interaction, which are very different. And then very often in the Western way, the people who are taking it, and administrating, they know very little about the background, where all these medicines are coming from. They don't know. I mean, you may be taking psilocybin, you don't know anything about the Mazatec, at all. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You are just creating a model, which is a very Western model, and then you very often you isolate, from the many compounds, of a mushroom. You take the psilocybin, is a typical way of tobacco is nicotine, coca leaves are cocaine. I mean, this thing, which is so devastating. I think it is the it's called the reduction of everything into a certain molecule, and then you see that there are receptors and how it works. It was a time that I was very interested in this, yeah, but somehow, okay, well, I will let other people do it and care about that. I think that for me, I'm more and more interested in the relationship with living things, so that makes me more meaningful, than so in physics, I prefer to have the view of David Bohm, which, I call it the internal horizon. He call it the implicate order, where you dive from time into the mystery, and then the explicate order. I think that the worldview is I prefer to have a world viewing which is more encompassing than care. Of course, I understand the that very good to know that DMT goes there and that the receptor is there and it happens this, that. Oh, fine, fine. But at the end, I think that it is the traditional way of using these things, that is much more, at the end, positive, or I don't know how the world will be, better way of
I mean,
doing it.
yeah. I'm reminded of one of my teachers. He actually comes from Colombia, from the Valpes region, the Apaportes River. A group of people called the Tubu, and his name and title is Amika, and it's the kind of the storyteller of that tradition. And it's very interesting because from what I understand of the Tubu, anytime you work with a plant, and they work with a lot of plants, and even kind of going back to this interesting story you said about the river and the anaconda, the serpent. I mean, they, without going into too much detail, but they say, even eons ago, humans were suffering. And interestingly, these star beings from the star system, very particular, the star system Sirius, they descended the 12 dimensions of time and space on this primordial anaconda canoe. And on this canoe, they brought with them all of these plants like yagé and tobacco and coca and brugmansia. But they would say each of these stories has its place in the canoe, in the anaconda canoe, and it has its song and it has its dance, and its story. And I think a lot of people take that at face value, that it's maybe just a myth, or okay, there's a nice little dance or song that goes along with each plant. But even if you were to begin to maybe look at it on a deeper level, and kind of, as you said, this maybe more reductionist way of looking at things, you might even begin to see that perhaps the song begins to activate things, the resonance or the pitches of the song can maybe turn on certain things in the brain, or the dance, the rhythm of it can activate things. Or, even he would say there's healing codes that are built into the story. And if you really tune into that, if you begin to still yourself, that there's actually things that can be activated within you. But even that is still somewhat of a reductionist way of thinking. And, if you imagine that there were all of these very advanced people, I would imagine, of the Americas with these technologies, and they had these traditions, and all of these traditions took time. And, it's much easier to work with a plant with no song, with no story, with no technique, with no ritual. You would just take it and have an experience. And if that was deemed to be better, that's what people would do. But they put a tremendous amount of time into these traditions, and I think to devalue that is quite unwise. And again, it just seems like there's so much that we still don't know, and yet we're trying to somehow maybe find these shortcuts. But as you said, so many things can be lost in that translation.
Yeah. I was thinking, I was reading this in a book by Luis Cayon about the Macu. It has been studying the Macu, and how when they take the brew, they are traveling in with the physical world. I mean, not into some kind of but they are going visiting the places, along the river, going to the place, because every place has its being, its songs and things. The same with the oh, I forgot. Studied by Jean Landon. It would come to me. Do you have places when you take the brew? You go to places. You get in touch with the beings of those places. You are actually traveling, and and so they say. The Siona, by the way, Jean Landon were working with the Siona, when to take ayahuasca is to go to a certain place where, and the place can be a river, but the river has other dimensions as well. The river, you have the physical river, but then you have the river in the other dimensions and so on. So they'll go there and take and listen to the songs or sing with the spirits, and they have certain patterns and so on. So it's a journey which is somehow related to the territory. That's something that we have lost. We have lost the territory. we move around. You have lived probably in so many different places in your life. We are nomads, in a way, from city to place to place. We have lost the territory, and so we have lost in a way our base, because all these indigenous people, the territory, it's so basic, because it's there. The spirits are living there, different spirit, the different plants, it's all there. We have lost that. We have lost that. And so it's very difficult to accommodate in your mind something so different as people in the territory taking these things, going to places, visiting specific places, sacred, and so, and then us, because we are in a way, we are scattered, most of us scattered. I mean, I live in so many different countries, Now I made my place, so this is the place that I visit,
It's interesting. In Mika, often the Tubu they refer to humans in general as orphans of time and space. So
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah, yeah.
think it's an age old story. Um, you mentioned some of these people you had the opportunity to meet, people like Richard Evans Schultes and Dolmatoff. It reminded me of this beautiful saying that I think was attributed to Isaac Newton, who I think in a way was maybe even a shaman in his own right, maybe not in the way that we often think of it, but certainly involved in ancient mystery schools. But he said, if I've seen further than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And you've led this amazing life where you had this I don't want to say opportunity, because I think you created your life, but this encounter with all of these amazing people. Is that something you reflect about? I mean, there's probably very few, if any, who've had the encounters with so many of these kind of luminaries of the field, about what that means to you, or things that you've taken, because so many of these people have passed now, and it's
Oh,
with the
yeah.
passing of each person, it's like a library that's lost.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm sure there's so many people who would love to go back in time and talk to Schultes or talk to Wasson, and yet that will never happen. And yet you're still someone who in a way carries a seed of them as well.
Well, I've been lucky, or let's say, I'm not, because I'm looking for knowledge. I'm serving. I'm not ashamed to go to the people who know more on whatever I'm interested in. In fact, was you ask at these places, that's what I do. My goodness, this author is fantastic. Get in touch, invite him here so that we can talk. So that we can spend time together, and so I've been like this always. Um, um, and I've been lucky, in a way, because when you were young, when I was young, I was eager, and the people recognize that. I do it with nowadays that I'm old. When I have see young guys here, they come sometimes full of enthusiasm and they want to read. And I say, okay, you read this book and da da da, and then of course you open your home, to people who are eager for knowledge. And the people, everybody has opened their homes for me. So when I was with Schultes, suddenly, I said, okay, this is your room, this is your table, you can be here. Dorothy, his wife, was making food for me, and we spent hours, talking. He took me to the Peacock Museum, to the Harvard University. Okay, so it opened for me, and so well, lucky. And with some people, I had very brief encounters. I mean, with Richard Dolmatoff only twice, but those two meetings and one letter was enough for me, to suddenly, open up a whole. I remember being with Richard Dolmatoff. When I was most impressed by it was his library, the theme of his books. I mean, he had a classical education, philosophy and literature and this and that. At the same time, he was self-taught as well. He created the whole archaeology and anthropology in Colombia. He's the father of the Colombian anthropology by by himself. By going to the places and creating the department of anthropology in Universidad de los Andes, and also he created the whole thing. Self-taught. Well, I mean, 2 meetings and 1 letter, and seeing what is enough for me to say, okay, this is something that I have to do, you know, and and so on, I mean, so on, I mean, the film, you saw the film. I never made a film before, but I had 2 meetings again with Jorge Preloran, who was the head of the film school in Los Angeles University. And then I went to him and said, I want to make a film. And said, what is your equipment? I said, I have a Bolex, 25 seconds. I have a tape recorder. I don't have sync sound. I have 30 hours of recording material. I have 1.5 hours of 16 millimeter film. He said, perfect. This is all you need. He said, I made over 50 films with that. So I thought it was very little. No, it was perfect. And he showed me how to do it. And then in a way, using his method, the Preloran method of recording, his method was that you focus on one person who is going to be the person who is, the main character in your documentary. You record. Never put the person in front of you to say things. And said that is not, that is not the way you do a film. You never put the person in front of you and record and put it in the film. This is not well. That was his method. You record. He's in the evening when it's quiet. You record him, or her, telling the stories, telling about her life. At the time, it was so expensive. Tape was so expensive, so he said you have to have your finger in the pause button, because when the person begins to say things that that you cannot use or not interested in, you press the button, and then immediately when the person begins to talk, then you record that, and then you type the next day, not 2 days later. The next day, you immediately transcribe what you recorded, think about what you recorded, and then begin to make a story in your head, and then you see, I will need 5 seconds of a picture here. I need a tree. It will be 5, 6, 10 seconds. It's very expensive. You press the button and the dollars are running. So you do that, and so it is like this, And I managed to do with this film. Of course, it took me 1,000 hours of editing time, but I was able to put the narrative. But then narrative was so interested. I have it here, that it triggered. It became at the end a doctoral dissertation. Almost. I mean, almost. It was the base of the whole thing. So this was, what I recorded, typewriter, of course, at the time, but then there are so many ideas there that I said, man, good. Well, the concept of plant teachers, one of them. Then you realize what is behind, what they are talking about. The doctores, Toé is a doctor, Tabac is a doctor, Bobinsana is a doctor, Ayahuasca is a doctor, and so on. So you begin to see, wow, God, this is the way they look at the world, and so on. So
it's really interesting. You were just mentioning Dolmatoff, and I believe he was maybe Austrian or German, but
it was Austrian, yeah.
Yeah, very
From
fascinating
Salzburg.
that he became kind of this luminary or this founder of Colombian anthropology, and it just reminded me of what you said in the beginning, that when you were young and someone asked what you wanted to be a foreigner. And do you think there's something about kind of being an outsider, about being able to see things through another lens? I mean, even like when I asked you about the yagé in Colombia, like it was, you almost had to leave your country and culture to rediscover that.
Yeah, yes, of course. Very often you don't see what you have, simply, you live there, In fact, I was thinking about that because I live in a sort of paradise. Of course, it's a lot of work, but but to have this, and then we have the sea there. It's a beautiful, but somehow you get used to it. you just, you get used to it, and then, okay, so you don't see it because it is when you have something different, then you begin, while I talk about the circle and the square, only when you have another thing, way of looking at things, and then you go back and then you see it again, it's new, so I think that it's very important, I mean, shamans even in the Amazon. I mean, they remember many years ago in '85 we were thinking with a group of people to write a book of shamanic networks. Very often they have to go to other places, other tribes, on an indigenous group, to learn, and then go back to the society. And all of them, usually have very wide idea of the other tribes, because they have these peregrinations of learning, and all over the Amazon. It was like that. I don't know nowadays, but it was like that. You have to go to other places to learn and come back to your place, So I think it is necessary, in a way, to change perspective to be able to see it, and then the problem of time when getting old is that if you don't have anything different, then the time goes very quickly. Because nothing happens, But then when you see it again, then you experience time, and time goes slowly because time is always subjective, And then, so I have to be careful because I'm 78, So not too many years in front of me, So I have to be careful with, how I spend the last years of my life,
I heard you say that Don Emilio, someone asked him like why do you take plants? And I believe you said that he said it strengthens your body and clarifies your mind.
Exactly, exactly.
Do you think that's a bit what you're speaking of, and this ability of plants, I mean, to make us more vital, but also to clarify the mind, to see things from a different way that allows us in a way to lead a better life?
Absolutely. I mean, he was said to clarify the mind and to strengthen your body. And that is the beautiful thing that we now know from the pharmacological point of view, also what happens with ayahuasca. In fact, because we have harmine, which is tremendous, the potential, medicinal potential. We have DMT as well, the work of the Edefresca and all this. So in fact, that's what it's doing, is strengthening your body and clarifying your mind. Absolutely. That's, what the Emilio said. Among other things, you have visions. Okay, but, it is not the main thing, very often it is simply clarity about your own life, you go into relationships, with other people, with your parents, with your friends, with your children, etc. So 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 ayahuasca is very relationship relational, so it's just getting into touch with all that, sometimes inside, sometimes outside, sometimes in this field or that field, depending on what you are working on at the time and so on. So yeah.
Kind of tying back full circle, when we started this conversation, you're saying you're in Brazil. That's where your home and your place now are, and this idea of Jemanja and these orishas, and like often when people speak of these plants like ayahuasca or these other master plants, they speak from a maybe more indigenous point of view, Indian point of view. But I think one of the really fascinating things about Brazil, where you are, is as you said, these syncretic traditions which incorporate indigenous use of ayahuasca or other plants with African traditions of spiritism, of European ideas of Christianity. Is that something you can speak a bit more about what that maybe journey has been like for you? Because it is such a fascinating and very uniquely, I'd say, Brazilian phenomena of this merging of something that's just very Brazilian. I mean, it's a juxtaposition of the history and culture of Brazil into these traditions that work with ayahuasca as a sacrament, but also incorporating Christian traditions, Spiritism traditions, and creating something very, very unique.
Well, I mean, this is well, I mean, it happens also in Colombia, in Peru, and, perhaps never in the study, or not to the extent which is clear here in Brazil. Okay, you have a huge country, you had, huge black population, I mean, over 50% of the Brazilians consider themselves, blacks, or brown, we have indigenous population, unfortunately, not so high, but still, is there. And then you have, the European, but they had been mixing, Yes, last night when I was in this Yemanja ceremony, most of the people, they were white or mixed. There were, of course, a lot of black people as well, But we are in the south, where most of the population is of European extract, and so, but they are also getting into the Orishas and Yemanja and Ogun, and and so the Afro-Brazilian ideas, they are also getting into the many. I will say, oh no, all, because here you have, also very, very evangelical, very big, population in which, it's all very clear. It is the Bible and everything is clear. It's completely Christian. But there are many other instances. What fascinated me most of Barquinha, which is in Acre, and Acre, all the Brazilian Amazon was heavily influenced by the Afro-Brazilian religions because of the robber. When after the Second World War, I mean, as you know, robber is Amazonian, and there was this big robber boom from about 1950 to the 1914, the First World War, and then the British stole samples of rubber, took it to Kew Garden in London, and from there they went to the Malaysia and the Southeast Asia, and then the plantations, and then the demand of rubber in the Amazon just fell. It became too expensive, But then after the Second World War, the Japanese took Southeast Asia, and rubber was needed. That's the reason why it's interesting that rubber, the place of rubber in all this, because it was because of rubber that Schultes was sent to Colombia, to find rubber, to count how many species of ebea there were in the rivers, places, because suddenly, the Allies needed rubber. Brazil took part in the Second World War, sent some soldiers to fight Mussolini in Italy, and then they needed rubber. The Allies needed rubber, and there was a big display of population from the Brazilian northeast into the Amazon, into Acre, the Amazon, and it is among these people that the Santo Daime thing came out. So it is the mixture of the rubber tappers with the indigenous influence, the Catholicism, of course, which is basic, popular Catholicism with its many forms, and then the Afro-Brazilian religions, and it all mixed, and which is fantastic. That's why when I got into discover Barquinha, I said, my God, it's like a full meal, of all sort of elements, Get the Catholic. For me, it was funny, in a way, because remember finding myself sitting at the table in the church, the table which is in the form of a cross, and the Barquinha is like the dynamo of the whole ceremony. And they asked me to sit on the table one ceremony, and I felt the force of the collective. I mean, the energy is there. There's no doubt to me. Which they are dealing with something which is, you can feel it. And then you have Jesus and Mary, etc. And I was going to be a priest. So, and I left all that, and then again I was there in front with Jesus and Mary, and again. But the difference was that in the altar you have mermaids, you know, and you have the orishas, and then you have the pretos vellos. Yeah, so you have the African element there, and the memories, which is a mixture of Mediterranean ideas and water spirits, both from the Africa and from the Americas and so on. So it's just fantastic. It was to be in this fantastic soup of ideas and of songs, of rhythm and so on. So, and that I love that in Brazil. Last night, we were talking to a young woman, black woman, who told us, I was with my wife, told us, I'm of the candomblé, but I am also Catholic, and I am also a lot of Brazilian now. There's huge 35% of some of our more of this religion that came from the States, in fact, and evangelicals. So this woman was telling me, I'm candomblé, Catholic, and evangelist. The three. And there's no contradiction there. They can, of course, for many evangelicals, candomblé will be horror. It's the shoes and there's the devil and so on. But some people assimilate all of it. My wife, she's both Catholic and candomblé. I mean, Afro-Brazilian. And she takes all that serious. I mean, it is. And it was a ceremony last night. It was a ceremony, only that ceremony with drums and dancing and singing to the sea, and then you go to the sea and you make offerings with flowers to the Yemanja. It's just beautiful. It's fantastic. So this is wonderful here in Brazil. In my country, in Colombia, not well. I have not been studying, but not so much. Although you have Santeria as well, you have the Santeria, the Afro. But I cannot, I have not been there. I have not been doing anything, so I cannot say. Probably in Cuba, much more. The Cuba and the Catholic, Christian, has been mixed more there, and I don't know the other countries. In fact, I mean, just thinking about that makes me think how ignorant I am, how little, I know about that. I should, but, yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating because even in the U.S., as you said, a lot of these Christian traditions, they would speak in tongues and cast spirits out of people, and even as big communities, it was very much communal ceremonies in that way as well. And this is something that's been lost, I think, more and more, but traditionally it was very much there as well.
Yeah.
How big of a part do you think ayahuasca use is in Brazil? I mean, you have these big churches like Santo Daime, UDV. I mean, it's certainly there. Do you see it? Do you feel it as part of the life of people? And do you think it's something that's growing as well as ayahuasca does begin to spread more worldwide?
It's difficult for me to say. No, I don't see it here, for instance, in Florianopolis. I don't see the presence. Although I know they have a UDP church, or center, not far from here. I know that Santo Daime have a community there as well. So it is here, but it's not something that you can. I mean, most people have heard about Santo Daime, but there is not. You don't feel that, in the society. At least I don't. Not among the people, that I know, or through my wife, even artists or writers. Not so much. So not here. Of course, in Acre it will be completely different. If you go to Rio Branco, I mean, it is embedded. It is deeply into the society. So everybody will know about Santa Daime. Many of them will be attended a ceremony or I mean, it's part of the culture. Not here in the South, not so much. Not in the South. But as I said in the beginning, there are many Brazils. This is, it's a continent by itself. You can put all of Europe inside Brazil. So yeah.
You're coming from your place in Florianopolis, which I believe is called Ayahuasca. Can you speak a bit about that, about your vision and what you're doing there, what your plans are for the place?
Okay. We celebrated last year 25 years of Ayahuasca, of 25 years. So we have been very discreet, very, very discreet, we didn't, we don't want to call much attention, although now I'm, I don't know how many people you have in your following you, but we have been very, very discreet, because our thing is more. I mean, it's educational. It's an educational place. That's the way of thinking. Interdisciplinary place. Dialogues of disciplines. And so remember when I started. I said I want to have a place where I can invite my friends. In my generation, of course, I know in my generation is Dennis and Jonathan, who just passed away. Some months ago, and many of the friends. So I wanted to have a place where we can meet. But then this idea came. Grew up. It's a labor of love. We're still building. It's not finished. Has been 25 years gradually putting the structure. We started very, very humbly. Now we have better facilities and so on to bring people, small groups, not more than 11 participants and 3, 4, 5 sometimes teachers, which bring people from, we have had David Abraham, we have Bernard Carr, the physicist, the best friend of John Hopkins. We have people like Grant Hancock, botanists, pharmacologists, historian, Egyptologists, all sort of people. People that I wanted to meet. So I gave, in a way, I gave up the university, the academic career, but I'm bringing the people I'm interested in here. So that we can learn from each other. So there has been the idea. It's a place for learning. Creating the botanical garden. It's not the same. You talk about bobbing sana, or you can see, you can smell the plant. You can, it's completely different thing when you have first. You can touch. You can, and we have a beautiful place. To walk around and see the plants. We have the library, big library, 3,500 books, all catalog, alphabetical order, anthropology, biology, physics, history, religion, all well organized so that people said, okay, you have to read this book or read this chapter, like that, And now we are creating more and more. We are having residents. That's the new thing, So I'm getting old, so seminars are very demanding, So because it's 24 hours, taking care of usually 2-week seminar. So now we are having more residents. We have had people from many different countries who come here for, let's say, write the doctoral dissertation or the master dissertation, or writing a book, or writing poetry, or painters, or all sort of people. They come here, spend 1 month or 2 months, whatever. So we have this residence program, which is very nice because brings young people here from whom I can learn as well. Of course, that's the idea. So they come with some okay, so talk and brainstorming, and we have people working in different areas. It's very nice to get together, and each of us talk about our interests, and then it's cross fertilization of ideas, and so that's what we do here. So a few seminars per year because it's very demanding, and also this place, southern Brazil is very expensive, Florianopolis extremely expensive. So I know that it's prohibited for many people. So that's 10, 11 participants, paying participants, and then the teachers that we bring from anywhere. Ede Frexka from Hungary has been very often with us, almost every year. He's a psychiatrist and a psychologist. He had been writing about DMT and many other things. I mean, over 200 publications, very encyclopedic knowledge always comes. And we always have with us a medical doctor or a psychiatrist with us, always, just in case, And then now we started, we do holotropic breath work. We always invite, not always, but most of the time, invite one person. Now is coming Sarima Rodriguez from Spain, who studied with Stan Grof. And so she does holotropic breath, one session in the seminar. It's very interesting, when you have two sessions of brew, and then you have a holotropic breath work, and again two. It is in between, and it opens, a lot of material for the people. So it's very, very useful. And so that's what we do. We are going now preparing a seminar. It's going to be in October. I invited, is going to be with us Glenn Shepard, who is an anthropologist, American, who works in Belém do Pará in the Golden Museum. He has been working with Machigenga, Piro, several indigenous tribes. He speaks 2 or 3 Amazonian languages, plus French, German, of course, Portuguese, Spanish, English. We are going to have with us Rebecca Senanayake. She's from Sri Lanka originally, but just defended her doctoral dissertation in New Zealand. And just brilliant doctoral dissertations. I said, I want to learn more from this woman. She knows so much. I met her briefly in Exeter in the Breaking Conventions conference. But now she's going to be here 2 weeks. We have a lot to talk about because she has been doing work with the vegetalistas, doing the diet really even more serious than I did because she had the time. She, spent really a long time doing the diet, learning not only from the plant, but also from other plants, not only for the ayahuasca, but also other plants, and so on. So we have much to learn from each other. Edefrect is coming, and so on. So this is what we do. If anybody is interested, go to. I don't have the seminar yet on the website. I'm going to put it soon. I'm still waiting for titles of lectures and so on from Glenn and Rebecca. But it's going to be soon there. And it's just 11 participants, and I already have 4. And I have not published yet. So the website. So yeah.
Well, amazing, Luis. We're over 2 hours. I think I could pick your brain for another 2 days, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to speak about before we close?
No. I want to encourage young people to open the mind to many different disciplines. Try to because we all need, if we are interested in state of consciousness, we need biology deeply. We really get, it's life. We have to get into biology very much. So it's and history, of course, and philosophy and so many other things. There's something that I see how even in the Western philosophy, there have been always this very narrow path, Spinoza, and then later Merleau-Ponty, and then, all these people who, Goethe before that. I mean, saw the sensibility, to animism, has been there, has not been explicit. Jung, pity, I was thinking the other day, if Carl Jung knew about these things, he will have an experience with that. I mean, he will be fantastic, because he will see the archetypes, he will see, aha, this is what I'm talking about, It's more than that, but still, it is there, these are common motifs that we all have, Campbell, I can imagine, as well, he will be delighted to have all these, open up, These are people that I consider, mentors and colleagues, even though they never experienced, perhaps, Jung did it, or as far as I know, Joseph Campbell didn't either. Maria Gimbutas, another, Lithuanian, another person who I'm sure that, these people with big minds will be interested in this kind of thing. So we have to take this seriously, not as, and then I warn, I mean, I don't want to criticize places that I don't know, but I'm a little bit afraid of places that we take. Okay, you take ayahuasca and you take San Pedro and you have Iboga and then you have Cambo and it's like this is like shopping. Just go and have this. Like sometimes you meet people. Especially unfortunately Americans say, "Oh, I did London, I did Paris, I did Vienna." I mean, so it's just like collecting things, and I say, "I did," I took it, So take them seriously, making as tools to learn, to really learn, and and you don't need to take it all the time, because it's like a window. It took me 7 years from my first experience to my second one. But during those 7 years, I was doing my field work. I was studying so much as possible, reading about that, So when I had my second experience, wow, I knew much more. And then I understood, the Amerindian way of, in my second experience is when I realized that I've been spending so many years of my life studying the Western, the European way of looking at things, and I've neglected the Amerindian epistemology. So you see, wow, this is also very important, and so on. So that's what I have to say. Just a path of knowledge, of enthusiasm, and so on.
Well, it's fascinating because even a group of people who I spent some time with, the Shipibo, it's their term for ayahuasca is uni, and uni is often translated as knowledge, as wisdom. And so I think these plants are paths of knowledge and wisdom. And I think it's a beautiful way to bring this to a close. And thank you again for your time and your work. And, much in the same way that you said all of these mentors were really important in your life, I think people like you are really important for so many people like myself, who've really allowed us to open up a path and to have kind of shoulders of giants to stand on, much like I mentioned this Isaac Newton quote. And you've lived an extraordinary life. You've lived the life of, I think, 10 people rolled into one. So I think you've done amazing work, and I really wish you all the best. And one day I'd love to meet in person. And if I can help with anything, please reach out. And this will probably be up in a month, and I'll send it to you, and feel free to use it, share it, whatever you feel.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Luis. Thank you. I really appreciate this. All right, everyone. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was, again, very much a pleasure, very much an honor for me to sit down and speak with Luis. He's had an extraordinary life. He's done so much, and I think really contributed to this field. So I trust you all gained a lot from that conversation. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help. Patreon's a really great site. I really like the idea that it's built on this idea of reciprocity. So if you feel like you are or have gained something from this podcast, it's an opportunity to give back, and also in giving back, receiving things too, like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, thank you very much to all of the patrons, the people supporting that way. Your help and support means so much. If you're interested in working with myself, I have our 2026 schedule out online. You can check that out on my website, nicotianarustica.org. Beautiful opportunity to go more deeply into this world of plant medicine, or to experience it for the first time. Really, I think magical things can happen. And as always, helping with the algorithms is a really big help. So if you're viewing this on YouTube, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it. I hope this finds you all well. Thank you as always for the support, and I will see you all on the next episode.